By the winter of 1944, much of the world believed the war in Europe was nearly over. Allied armies had broken out of Normandy, liberated Paris, and were advancing steadily toward Germany's borders. Newspapers spoke confidently of victory, politicians promised an end to the bloodshed, and soldiers dared to imagine that Christmas might be spent at home. But beneath the frozen forests of the Ardennes, Adolf Hitler was preparing one final, desperate gamble. A surprise offensive so bold, so brutal, and so reckless that it would shock the world and plunge Europe back into chaos. This would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, the largest and bloodiest battle ever fought by the United States Army, and the final major German offensive of the Second World War. The strategic situation in late 1944 was grim for Nazi Germany. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army was advancing relentlessly, crushing German divisions and pushing toward Berlin. In the West, Allied forces, American, British, Canadian, and Free French, were pressing against Germany's defensive lines. Germany's cities were being reduced to rubble by Allied bombing campaigns. Fuel shortages crippled the Wehrmacht, and manpower losses were irreplaceable. Yet Hitler refused to accept defeat. He believed that a single decisive blow could shatter Allied unity and force a negotiated peace in the West, allowing Germany to concentrate its remaining strength against the Soviet Union. Hitler's plan was audacious to the point of madness. He envisioned a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest, the same rugged terrain used successfully during the 1940 invasion of France. German armored divisions would punch through thinly held American lines, cross the Meuse River, and capture the vital port of Antwerp. By splitting British and American forces apart, Hitler hoped to sow political chaos among the Allies and undermine their resolve to continue the war. It was a plan built on speed, secrecy, and shock, but it also relied on resources Germany no longer truly possessed. The Ardennes region was chosen precisely because it seemed unlikely. The Allies viewed the area as quiet and unsuitable for large-scale operations, especially during winter. Dense forests, narrow roads, steep hills, and freezing weather made it a logistical nightmare. As a result, American units stationed there were often inexperienced or recovering from previous combat. This sense of relative calm bred complacency. Patrols were reduced, defenses were light, and many soldiers believed they were holding a resting sector. That illusion would soon be shattered. In absolute secrecy, the German High Command assembled nearly 200,000 troops, over 1,000 tanks, and thousands of artillery pieces. Movements were conducted at night, radio silence was enforced, and deception operations were launched to conceal German intentions. Even many German officers doubted the plan's feasibility, but Hitler dismissed their concerns. He believed willpower could overcome material reality. For the soldiers ordered into the Ardennes, there was little choice but obedience. On the early morning of December 16, 1944, the silence of the Ardennes was shattered. At 5:30 a.m., German artillery erupted along an 85-mile front, unleashing a thunderous barrage that stunned American positions. Under the cover of darkness and heavy fog, German infantry and armored units surged forward. Many American soldiers were caught completely off guard. Some were still asleep, others preparing breakfast. Communication lines were cut. Command posts overrun, and entire units were thrown into chaos within hours. The initial German assault achieved dramatic success. American defenses collapsed in several sectors as German forces advanced rapidly westward. The German 5th Panzer Army and 6th Panzer Army drove deep into Allied lines, creating a massive bulge in the front that would give the battle its name. Roads clogged with retreating American vehicles, refugees, and shattered units struggling to regroup. The shock of the attack sent ripples through Allied headquarters, where disbelief quickly turned to alarm. Weather played a crucial role in the early days of the battle. Thick clouds, snow, and freezing rain grounded Allied aircraft, denying the Americans their overwhelming air superiority. German units advanced under cover of fog, while American troops fought in bitter cold with inadequate winter clothing. Frostbite became as deadly as enemy fire. Temperatures plunged below zero, weapons jammed, vehicles froze, and wounded soldiers often died before medical help could reach them. Despite the chaos, pockets of fierce American resistance began to emerge. Small units, isolated and surrounded, fought stubborn delaying actions that disrupted German timetables. Road junctions became critical objectives, and battles erupted around villages whose names would become legendary: Saint-Vith, Elsenborn Ridge, and Bastogne. Every hour of resistance mattered, buying time for Allied commanders to respond and reorganize their forces. One of the most critical early actions occurred at Elsenborn Ridge, where American infantry and artillery units held firm against repeated German attacks. The ridge provided commanding terrain, and its defense prevented German forces from advancing north toward Liège. Here, American artillery proved devastating, firing thousands of rounds in some of the heaviest barrages of the battle. German units suffered severe losses, and the failure to break through Elsenborn Ridge would ultimately doom the northern wing of Hitler's offensive. Yet to the south, the situation was far more dire. German armored columns pushed deep into Allied territory, capturing fuel depots and advancing toward the Meuse River. Fuel was the bloodline of the offensive. German tanks were operating on razor-thin reserves, and every captured Allied fuel dump extended their reach. Yet even this success carried risk. Supply lines stretched dangerously thin, and delays caused by resistance, destroyed bridges, and traffic congestion began to accumulate. As reports poured in, Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight Eisenhower faced one of the greatest crises of the war. He immediately recognized the scale of the threat and ordered a massive response. Reinforcements were rushed from all directions, including elite units like the 101st Airborne Division and the 102nd Airborne Division. These troops were loaded onto trucks and driven through icy roads toward the front, often without proper winter gear or clear intelligence about the situation they were entering. Among the most dramatic moments of the battle was the race for the town of Bastogne. Located at a vital crossroads, Bastogne controlled several key roads essential for German movement. If it fell, German armored units would gain a clear path westward. The 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of the 10th Armored Division, was ordered to hold the town at all costs. They arrived just ahead of advancing German forces and quickly dug in, preparing for a siege that would test the limits of human endurance. As the German advance continued, Hitler authorized a special operation designed to spread chaos behind Allied lines. Operation Greif involved German soldiers fluent in English, led by Otto Skorzeny, infiltrating American positions disguised in U.S. uniforms. Their mission was to alter road signs, spread misinformation, and sabotage communications. Though limited in scale, the operation caused widespread paranoia. American troops began stopping one another at checkpoints, asking questions about baseball scores and American slang to identify imposters. By December 20th, the initial momentum of the German offensive was slowing. Allied resistance stiffened, fuel shortages worsened, and command confusion plagued German units. Meanwhile, Allied air commanders anxiously awaited a break in the weather. When the skies finally cleared, the full might of Allied air power descended upon German supply lines, armored columns, and troop concentrations. Bombers and fighter bombers struck relentlessly, transforming roads into killing zones and halting further advances. Yet the battle was far from over. Surrounded American units continued to fight in freezing conditions. German forces launched renewed assaults, and casualties mounted on both sides. What had begun as a daring gamble was becoming a brutal war of attrition fought in snow-covered forests and shattered villages. The Battle of the Bulge was entering its most desperate and deadly phase. And as Christmas approached, tens of thousands of soldiers, American and German alike, would spend the holiday not in warmth or peace, but in foxholes, under artillery fire, wondering whether they would survive the night. As the snow continued to fall across the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge entered one of its most legendary and harrowing chapters, the Siege of Bastogne. By December 21, 1944, German forces had encircled the town completely, trapping nearly 20,000 American soldiers inside. The 101st Airborne Division, supported by elements of the 10th Armored Division and scattered infantry units, now found themselves surrounded on all sides. Cut off from supplies, short on ammunition, food, medical equipment, and winter clothing, the defenders of Bastogne faced overwhelming odds in freezing conditions that pushed human endurance to its limits. Bastogne was far more than a small Belgian town. It was a vital road hub, with 7 major roads radiating outward through the Ardennes. German armored divisions depended on these routes to maintain momentum toward the Meuse River. Hitler's generals knew that without Bastogne, the entire offensive risked stalling. As a result, German commanders repeatedly ordered assaults against the town, convinced that American resistance would soon collapse. They underestimated the determination of the men inside the perimeter. Inside Bastogne, chaos reigned. Wounded soldiers lay in makeshift hospitals without anesthesia. Medics reused bandages, while doctors operated by flashlight in freezing basements. Ammunition was rationed, artillery fire carefully measured. Soldiers scavenged weapons from fallen comrades and enemy dead alike. The cold was merciless. Temperatures dropped well below freezing, and many troops lacked proper winter boots or coats. Frostbite claimed nearly as many casualties as German bullets. Despite the dire circumstances, morale inside Bastogne remained surprisingly strong. Officers moved constantly along the lines, encouraging their men, while chaplains and medics risked shell fire to tend to the wounded. Artillery units, though low on shells, delivered precise and devastating fire when German infantry attempted to break through. The town became a fortress of foxholes, roadblocks, and shattered buildings, each defended with grim resolve. On December 22nd, German commanders sent an ultimatum into Bastogne. Under a white flag, German officers delivered a message demanding the American surrender, warning of total destruction if resistance continued. The request reached Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne. Exhausted, frustrated, and unimpressed, McAuliffe reportedly responded with a single word: nuts. When the bewildered German officers asked for clarification, an American colonel explained that it meant the demand had been rejected. The response quickly became legendary, symbolizing American defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Outside Bastogne, Allied commanders raced against time. General Dwight E. Eisenhower recognized that the German advance posed a critical threat, but also saw an opportunity. By driving deep into Allied territory, German forces had stretched their supply lines dangerously thin. Eisenhower decided not to retreat, but to counterattack from the flanks, squeezing the Bulge until it collapsed. To execute this plan, he turned to one of the war's most aggressive commanders, General George S. Patton. Patton's Third Army had been advancing eastward toward Germany when the German offensive began. In a remarkable feat of planning and leadership, Patton pivoted his entire army northward in the midst of winter. Within days, tens of thousands of soldiers, tanks, and artillery pieces were moving through icy roads toward Bastogne. Patton promised Eisenhower that he could attack within 48 hours, a claim many considered impossible. Yet, through relentless discipline and logistical precision, Patton delivered. On December 26, 1944, the lead elements of Patton's Third Army broke through German lines and reached Bastogne. The siege was not fully lifted immediately, but a crucial supply corridor was opened. Trucks poured in with ammunition, food, medical supplies, and winter gear. The sight of American tanks rolling into the town lifted the spirits of exhausted defenders who had endured days of isolation and relentless attack. Meanwhile, the weather that had initially favored the German offensive turned decisively against them. Clear skies allowed Allied air power to dominate the battlefield. Fighter bombers attacked German columns, destroying tanks, trucks, and artillery. Supply depots were bombed, bridges were smashed, and roads became death traps. German units, already short on fuel and ammunition, found themselves increasingly immobilized and exposed. The failure to capture Bastogne proved catastrophic for Hitler's plan. German armored divisions lost precious time and momentum while Allied forces regrouped and counterattacked. Fuel shortages became critical. Many German tanks were abandoned by the roadside, their crews unable to refuel. In some cases, German units resorted to siphoning fuel from captured or destroyed Allied vehicles, further slowing their advance. As December turned to January, the battle evolved into a grinding struggle of attrition. American and British forces launched coordinated attacks along the northern and southern shoulders of the Bulge. Village by village, ridge by ridge, they pushed German forces back through snow-covered forests and ruined towns. Combat was brutal and intimate, often fought at close range in dense woods where visibility was limited and artillery fire shattered trees into deadly splinters. The human cost of the battle was staggering. Entire units were wiped out. Soldiers endured days without sleep, food, or shelter. The cold left permanent injuries, and psychological trauma was widespread. Many veterans later described the Battle of the Bulge as the worst experience of the war, not because of its scale alone, but because of the relentless combination of fear, exhaustion, and freezing weather. On the German side, morale collapsed as the offensive unraveled. Hitler refused to authorize retreat, ordering his troops to hold positions that were no longer defensible. German commanders struggled to maintain cohesion as Allied forces pressed in from all sides. What had begun as a bold gamble now became a desperate fight to avoid annihilation. By mid-January 1945, the Bulge had largely been erased. Allied forces reclaimed lost ground, restoring the front lines to nearly their original positions. The German army suffered catastrophic losses, tens of thousands killed, wounded, or captured, along with irreplaceable tanks, aircraft, and experienced soldiers. For Germany, the Battle of the Bulge marked the final exhaustion of its offensive capability in the West. Yet the war was not over. Though beaten back, German forces continued to fight fiercely as Allied armies advanced towards the Rhine and ultimately into the heart of Germany itself. The men who survived the Ardennes would carry its scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of their lives. The Battle of the Bulge had failed in its objective, but it succeeded in one grim sense. It demonstrated the extraordinary brutality of the war's final months. As Europe moved closer to victory, the fighting grew only more desperate, more destructive, and more unforgiving.